Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Enjoy the Walk Golf podcast. This week, we're talking wedges, and we're really excited to have wedge maker himself out of Rockport, Texas, Terry Koehler, on the show. Terry, you were with Edison Golf. Excited to get into your wedge fit technology, your online orders built spec for each order specific to each player. So really excited to get into this, as I've had some Edison wedges in my hands now for a little over a month or two, and I think they're in my bag to stay. So Terry, appreciate the time. Excited to have you on the show.
Well, it's good to be here, and I have been a wedge junkie for a long time. This is a very special week for me with the Open at St. Andrews. That's a trip to St. Andrews in 1990 is kind of how I got really hooked on wedge design, and that's a great story, and I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, I think, Dante, you and I always enjoy getting into the guts of what makes a good wedge when it comes to tough, tight lies that they're going to see, especially out at St. Andrews this week.
Yeah, I'm going to be geeking out over this because that's one I've started to dive in a lot more when it comes to the club building aspects. And one thing I'm intrigued on learning is more understanding the concept of the wedge grinds and bounces.
Well, I've kind of reduced the wedge category these days to, I call it G&G, grooves and grinds. That's all anybody talks about. And yet in every other category in golf, we talk about the head design. And nobody in golf in the wedge category talks about the head design. And I can tell you that grooves can only do so much to impart spin to a golf ball. And the rules governing grooves haven't changed in 12 years. So, we've improved our machining techniques, but every company out there is machining our grooves to the nth degree, with the precision we have nowadays. But guys, it's really a non-story. I mean, everybody's doing their grooves the same way. And this is like, really splitting hairs on spin. And, the grinds thing, I read there was an interesting article yesterday that was talking about Bones McKay, Justin Thomas's caddy, had talked Justin into playing two 60-degree wedges this week, one with a low bounce for the fairway and one with a high bounce for the for the bunkers. And I'm sitting there going, the rest of us don't have this opportunity. And secondly, it kind of goes to show you that a specialized grind is exactly that. It's very specialized. It's good for one thing and one thing only. I referenced a little bit ago, this is a very special week for me because in 1990, I made a trip to Scotland with my late brother, and we really got close to each other and had a fabulous time playing those courses. And I had been designing putters up to that time, and I discovered exactly what Justin Thomas is. I mean, the bounce that works in the bunker over there was not working in the fairway. Well, I didn't have a tour trailer to go to load myself up with new wedges, right? So I had this off-the-shelf main brand sand wedge, and we were touring around St. Andrews, and we came to Octorloni's golf shop, and I saw a grinding wheel there, and I had this idea, and I ran back to the hotel and got my wedge, came back over, and I ground most of the bounce off of the back part of the wedge, but then I ground the leading quarter inch of the wedge. I ground like a very severe bounce all the way up to like the first groove. Well, that made it look just ugly as hell. So then I ground back on the hosel to make it look at least presentable at address. Well, that then took, 20 grams of weight off of the golf club. So I packed a bunch of lead tape back in the back of the golf club. And this thing was remarkable the rest of our trip for St. Andrews and Carnoustie and Turnberry and Troon. And we had a fabulous trip. And this weird grind that I had perfected, had first tried, really worked. And I patented that sole design, putting two bounce angles in the sole. And I patented that in 1994. I've been building it into every wedge ever because my theory is you can't fit bounce because you don't know what your next wedge lie is going to look like. And, I assume you guys are recreational golfers, maybe a 2 handicap, maybe a 12, whatever. But you don't make the same swing every time either. That's why we're not playing the tour, because we don't make the same swing every time. So I wanted to build a sole that regardless of the lie you encounter, regardless of the turf you encounter, regardless of the bunker sand, this sole's going to work pretty good regardless of the swing you make. And I think we need to turn our attention to fitting the rest of the wedge. We need to fit the shaft and the loft and line and get all those things right, the grip size, and get away from this whole grinds thing, because these grinds they're twofold. One is each grind is really the result of working with one specific tour professional the way he likes to hit the ball. But the other thing it does is it allows these companies to get more shelf space at the retail store. If I have 6 different grinds on every loft, I get 4 to 5 times more inventory on the shelf. So, I think it's confusing to golfers. And my thought is, let's just get a sole that works pretty damn good everywhere, really good most places, and let's work on the rest of the wedge.
Well, and I think, my biggest thing is, I played in college a little bit at the D3 level. And even when we were custom ordering wedges through manufacturer A, B, C, or D, one company's got a K grind and a M grind and a D grind. And it's like, unless you really dive in and you sit down, read through it, understand which one means, you're looking at an order sheet, having no clue what these letters really relate to. Is it high bounce? Is it low bounce? What's it going to help me with on a firm lie versus a wet lie? Right. And it's to me, like you said, I think we've got so convoluted on this grind talk from a manufacturer standpoint that it's really muddied the waters for us players who aren't really using it every day, and B, aren't really diving in or sitting down and reading the specs on each one of these wedges to understand what they do.
Well, you're exactly right, Dalton. And the thing about it, and I preach this over and over and over to people, the only way to know if a wedge is going to work for you is to take it to the courses you play and play 5 or 6 rounds where you're going to get that whole variety of shots that you get. You may not get every lie on the round this afternoon. You may get a lie tomorrow or Saturday that isn't anything like what you saw today. And so I think you have to take the wedge you're thinking about buying, you have to take it to the course, and you have to play 3 or 4 rounds with it. And I'm very overt about this. It's if the store won't let you do that, don't buy that wedge, because if it doesn't work for you, they're not going to take it back. We at Edison, one of the things I created here was a performance guarantee. I want you to play our wedge for 30 days. I want you to hit every shot imaginable. Don't take it to the range for a week. I mean, go play golf with it and watch what happens. And if you don't like it, send it back. I don't want it in your bag if you're not happy with it. I'll go sell it used to somebody else. But we get very few of them back, because if you give these wedges that kind of trial, you'll find out this is a sole that is never going to be a handicap for you. And the rest of the wedge, which nobody talks about, is designed to give superior performance. So,
well, I think one of the things that shocked me, right, was no matter what manufacturer, my biggest struggle was getting a little too steep on it, and then obviously creating that digging with a leading edge on a lot of wedges that I've had in the past. In the video that we're going to release with this podcast as well, I talk a lot about that, of like, it almost has eliminated my digging I would say mishap, my digging miss, right? Like that's been a big thing in my game where I just struggled with, and it seems to have been eliminated with these wedges. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it really goes back to how you grind that sole and how that really attributes to less digging.
Well, and that's exactly right. What we've done is we put a very severe bounce on the first third of an inch of the sole. So when you're coming down steep, which we do sometimes, maybe all the time, but sometimes, then that little ridge in the sole that divides these 2 bounces, that ridge engages the turf before the leading edge does. So it's going to help reject that club. I mean, a bounce is a very simple concept. The wedge, and I explain this to beginners all the time, the wedge is exactly that. It is a wedge. You wedge the club between the ball and the earth. The loft makes the ball go up. The bounce makes the club go up. And that's what bounce is all about. And I mean, you've got to be extraordinarily skilled to play, a low or no bounce wedge, because you can dig that leading edge. And, we're looking for forgiveness in turf interaction. We're also looking for forgiveness in ball interaction. And so, that's where this sole has been created. I've been working on it for 32 years now. And I've done 6 or 8 iterations of it. And every time I make it better and better and better. And, we have a following from way back in my days of Reed Lockhart and Eidolon and Score through the Ben Hogan years and now to Edison that people know this sole just really works. It is very forgiving.
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on the history there of how long you've been in this game with this wedge style. Why Edison, right? Like, why the need to kind of branch off and create Edison Golf and do what you're doing now to provide this kind of service to golfers across the country and across the world?
Well, Dalton, I've had a blessed life. I'm 70 years old. I don't remember life before golf. I grew up on a little 9-hole golf course. My father was a good player. We had a great professional there that taught us all as kids. And so and my dad was one of those that encouraged us, if you're into something, whether it's bird hunting or fishing, get into the whole thing, understand the history, understand the tools. And so I was always the kid that took my fishing reels apart, my toys apart to see how they work, took shotguns apart. And when I got in the golf business in 1980 as an advertising agent guy, I was fascinated by the back end of the shop because I could see all these clubs that I've been playing scratch golf for, my adult life. Now I get to really understand how they work. And I was very blessed to have some tremendously talented people way before the days of launch monitors and all that, people that just dug it out of the dirt, so to speak. And they shared their knowledge with me. I mean, I'm so blessed to have had that opportunity. And as I ventured into wedges, what really was interesting to me as I got into it was how wedges haven't changed anywhere near how irons have changed, how woods have changed, how putters have changed. And, there was no such thing as a hybrid 30 years ago. And now everybody, even tour players, carry one or two. So the golf technology has really pushed us all in the golf equipment. But I've got wedges in my collection from the 50s and 60s and 70s that look pretty much just like what's on the market today. And so it's a category that really has been stagnant because, in my opinion and observation, working with tour players holds you back because tour players have extraordinary skills that they've built over many, many years, hitting thousands and thousands of shots. And if you change their golf club, you're going to negate those skills. So they won't let, the big companies change their wedges very much. And after I brought the Ben Hogan company back into golf in 2014 through 17, I thought I was going to retire. And I started writing a blog again as the wedge guy, which I've done for many, many years. And no sooner than I started that, people said, "Hey, when are you going to do wedges again?" And I realized I'm not done there. I am not through with the wedge category, but now I don't have a Ben Hogan brand or any a term that we coined was respectful irreverence. But now I don't have to be respectful. I can just be irreverent as I want to be because I'm a challenger brand. And what we're doing with Edison is presenting a completely different design of a wedge head in the way the weighting is so that we can deliver more forgiveness, more consistent distance control. Everybody knows that shot hit a little high in the face that doesn't go anywhere, right, Dalton? You experience that. Everybody does. And my driving question is, why is that acceptable? If you hit a driver a half an inch off the sweet spot, you still expect it to be good. If you hit a hybrid half an inch off the sweet spot, you expect it to be good. Why do we accept wedges to be that penal? And so I said, I'm going to fix that. And that's what we're doing at Edison Golf.
That's that's exciting. I think, you hit the nail on the head. The marketing on every other club is more forgiveness, right? Hit it farther out in the toe and still hit it down the fairway. Hit it on the heel, hit it down the fairway, hit it high, low, whatever it may be. And that conversation has traveled pretty much all the way down almost to the wedges. Stops right at the 8 or 9 iron, and it hasn't made it there until it seems like what you're doing. And I can speak from just having these clubs in the bag. I was texting Dante earlier today. I'm like, I'm not just better. I'm all of a sudden pretty much lethal with these wedges in the bag from 125, 130 in. I'm having a tough time remembering since I've had them in the bag when I've missed a green from that yardage from there.
The thing about wedges that's real interesting, and I've put wedges on the Iron Bar and Swing robot for years, and I'm a big believer in testing. And we did an experiment some years ago that we took a mainstream brand and we took their pure tour blade forged pitching wedge and their wedge of the same loft and put them on Iron Byron. And a pure tour blade pitching wedge is about 38% more forgiving than the wedge. Well, why would we accept that? I mean, I don't know what kind of putter you guys have, but the big spaceship mallets, I call them, they're designed for forgiveness so that if I have the face square, the ball will go pretty good. And wedges are just finicky, and wedges by nature are hard to hit. I mean, you have a lot of loft, 50, 55, 60 degrees. Everything is a glancing blow with the wedge. Whereas a 7-iron is a pretty direct blow. A driver is a very direct blow. But a wedge is a glancing blow because of the loft. They're hard. I mean, wedges are hard to hit just by nature of the loft. But I said, I'm going to pack weight so high on that wedge that I'm going to bring trajectory down and spin rate up and I'm going to give you forgiveness of that high face, that toe miss, that high face miss. And that's what you've seen, Dalton, is that, you're not hitting every shot perfect, but they're all going the same distance. And distance control is what wedge play is all about.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that's been, kind of groundbreaking for my game. It's brought my consistency level to what I expected to be at, but always just kind of struggled to be. I can hit the long ball, but when the wedge game's not there, it doesn't mean much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, and it doesn't matter whether, a gap wedge is 88 yards for you or 120 yards for you. It needs to go that far every time. But when you miss it a little bit here, a little bit there, it still needs to go that distance, whatever your distance is. And we all get penalized with traditional tour design wedges when we miss it a little high in the face. And, every week in a golf tournament on TV, you'll see some tour pro come up 50 or 60 feet short with a wedge shot. Well, we know tour players do not misjudge wedge shots 60 feet. But the camera will go in and they'll say something like, hey, you see, he hit it a little high on the face. And when that happens, with a wedge, it just comes up short. My question is, why is that acceptable? It's not acceptable in any other club in my bag. Why is that acceptable with my money clubs? So that's what drives me as I pursue wedge design continuously and consistently.
Yeah, now you talk about, wedge design, right? And you're talking about, you're trying to wedge it close. So we're talking about grinds here and bounces, and a lot of the wedges these days, it kind of comes a loss also with spin. I've seen on your website here that it says you can increase up to 38% more spin. How does that come into play with the design of your wedges?
Well, Dante, that's a great question. And people don't think about the wedge head design, because if you strip the graphics off of the top 5 brands of wedges, you basically have the same golf club. All the weight's on the bottom, and you got a very thin upper section. So the holy grail in driver design, for example, is high launch, low spin, right? Well, how are we getting that? Because we're putting carbon fiber crowns on the clubs. We're moving all the weight in that driver head as low as we can possibly get it, which makes the ball launch high with low spin. Well, where's the weight in your wedge? It's very low in the club head. So by design, the wedge head wants to launch the ball high with no spin. I mean, that's the physics of golf club design. What you see is what you get. And what I've done is move much more weight up into the top half of that club head. I've got 25 to 30% more mass above the point of impact of the golf ball. Well, there's this concept in golf club design that's a proven theory called gear effect. And, where the ball makes contact with the club face, where is the mass of that club head? In that driver, the mass is concentrated below that point of impact, which is high launch, low spin. But if I want lower launch and higher spin, I need to get more mass above that point of impact, which means in a wedge head, I've got to move a lot of weight up high in that golf club. Now, you see every other brand of wedges out there in this year's models, some of them last time, they're starting to thicken the top of the blade by 20 thousandths, 30 thousandths of an inch. That's not enough to matter. You've got to move a lot of mass to make a golf club perform differently. And, and I would tell you, you can put a caliper on them. None of the wedges from the mainstream companies are as thick in the top of the blade as my wedges and Reed Lockhart were in 1995. So 30 years ago, I was ahead of where these guys are now, but I wasn't restricted by tour players. I'm serving the recreational golfer, the 4 to 10 to 12 to 16, 20 handicapper. That guy's looking for a different thing out of his wedges than the tour player is looking for. And Bob Vokey and Roger Cleveland, these are brilliant guys. I mean, they got great teams behind them, but they are focused on the tour player, and I don't care about that guy. He's got plenty of people taking care of him. I'm looking for that 10 handicapper. I'm looking for the comment Dalton just made, just like I'm deadly with my wedges now, and I never have been. That fuels me. I'm on the right track.
Yeah, he's grinning from ear to ear right now about his wedge game.
You want to know why? Because I am just
happy.
I am like a buzzsaw through our match play event at my home club right now, because I'm hitting the wedges so good. There's not much other reason why. So it makes it fun. The game becomes way more enjoyable. The short game becomes fun. I played in a member guest this past weekend. In one set of 9 holes, I chipped in 2 times, had a look at a third. I mean, just stuff that if you chip in once in a week or 2, you're happy. And I was, having looks at it once and twice in 9 holes. It just makes the game a lot of fun when you can rely on even a mishit wedge to still go where you want it to go.
Well, and that's the big thing is you feel that shot. Ooh, I hit it a little on the toe, but it carries that front bunker. I hit it a little high in the face, but it carries that creek and it's on the green. It's not as good as a perfect shot because, regardless of the golf club, there's one pinpoint place to produce perfect on every golf club. And whether it's a wedge, a driver, whatever. But what every golf club engineer outside the wedge category has been striving for is to expand that area of acceptable performance. I want to get that big driver. I can kind of slop it around a 1-inch circle on the face, and I'm going to get really good results out of it. Well, why can't I bring that forgiveness attitude to wedges? Because and nobody's talking about that. Nobody ever talks about forgiveness in wedges. There are some, I call them one-trick ponies out there with a big wide sole. And if you're a crappy bunker player and you play really soft sand, there's probably a place for those, but they're not versatile shot-making machines. That in a round of golf, if you're a 8 or 10 or 12 handicapper, in a round of golf, you're going to put a wedge in your hand 12 or 15 times because you're going to miss greens. You're going to have, your approach on par fives. Well, you're going to put that club in your hand more often than your driver and almost as often as your putter. Well, let's give some more attention to these things because we can do better. And that's what Edison is all about. It's what drives me and keeps me going every day.
That's
exciting.
Awesome. And another thing too is like you're saying, moving the mass up higher, right on the face, because perfect example that I can see where your wedge may come into play, speaking on to the higher handicap or to the more recreational golfer, the higher face. Now I've asked Dalton plenty of times about one shot I struggle with is, I'm coming into a pitch shot. Say I had an example of this past weekend. I was playing a member money event here, and I had myself a shot into a par 5 to get onto the green and try to stick it close. Now I had the most perfect lie because it was sitting on top of the rough. Next thing I know, I'm taking my wedge into the turf, into the ball, trying to clip the ball. Next thing I know, it comes out dead. It's a dud, short of the green. Now I got what could have been an easy 5 to 10 footer now becomes a 15 to 25 footer because next thing I know, I look on the face of the club and it's near to the first and second, third group.
Yeah.
You're saying with Edison Golf, that shot will be in my bag.
Well, and what happens with wedge contact is, if you go look at any tour design wedge and you look at any tour guy's wedge, go look at a wedge that's kind of been used for a while by a tour player, and it's got a dime-sized wear pattern about between the second and fifth groove, about the size of a dime. But go to any bag room and look at your own wedges. You got a $50 size wear pattern that's centered around the fifth or sixth groove. Well, that tour design wedge performs entirely different at the fifth groove than it does at the second groove. But the tour player has optimized. He knows contact between the second and fifth groove is where I optimize that golf club. And he's good enough to hit it there every time. They play tighter fairways. Like you mentioned, Dante, the shot is perched up in the rough. It is very hard to not hit that shot high in the face because it's perched up. Amateurs, you made the comment, I don't know what kind of handicap you play to, but you have this like perfect lie. A perched up lie is not perfect with a wedge in your hand. A tight lie is perfect because a tight lie, you're going to hit the ball down in the lower half of the face. You're going to get a better trajectory and better spin. But recreational golfers play fluffier fairways than tour players do. They play fluffier sand than tour players do. They play inconsistent sand. They play it out of the rough more often. And so we need that wedge to perform around the center of the face of that golf club pretty much the same, whether you hit it on the fourth groove or the third groove or the eighth groove. We need to give you pretty much the same performance. And to your point, and we're not going to get perfect, but what we're going to get is a lot better. And I tell you, on the mainstream tour design wedges, if you hit shots on a robot around a $50 size spot on the face, your smash factor will vary by 18 to 22%. Smash factor makes the ball go, and if the smash factor is down by 20%, the ball cannot go as far. That's just simple golf club performance physics. We were able to engineer the Edison wedges where in that $50 size spot, our smash factor doesn't deteriorate by more than 8%. Well, that means that high face shot's going to carry the bunker instead of plugging under the lip. It's going to carry the creek. It's going to get on the front of the green. It's going to give you a 20-foot uphill birdie instead of a a chip shot. And that's what we're after, is we're after acceptable performance from your mediocre shots. I mean, if you lay the sod on it or hit it in the eyebrow, sorry guys, I can't fix that. I'm a club guy, but if you make contact somewhere on the club face, I designed this wedge to give you better, more consistent distance control, which is what wedge play is all about, than anything. No other wedge out there is even close.
I love that.
That's
and I think,
awesome.
You mentioned earlier, really catering to, the mid to high handicapper, the everyday guy. I think you guys do a phenomenal job of that with your Wedge Fit scoring range analysis. And I want to talk to that a little bit as well. You don't sell, correct me if I'm wrong here, any wedges kind of, retail, like at a Dick's Sporting Goods or anything like that. They're all custom fit to the player where they need it, maybe finding a gap in their pitching wedge to 9-iron and kind of filling that area. So these wedges really perform the way they're, not only designed to be, but they can get into someone's bag and fill those gaps they need to. Talk to us about the Wedge Fit system and why you felt like this was so crucial to have as part of Edison Golf.
Well, I created the first iteration of Wedge Fit 20 years ago. I've been perfecting it over the years. And what Wedge Fit is about is having a conversation with the golfer. What's in your bag? What kind of irons you playing? What kind of shafts you playing? What's the loft of your 9-iron, your pitching wedge? How do you launch the ball? We want to get an interrogation, if it will. We want to get a conversation going so we can help figure out what lofts, what shaft, what custom specs do we need to build. And to your point, we don't sell in stores. We sell everything custom built. There is not one finished golf club. UPS picked up this afternoon. There's not one finished golf club in our shop. A new batch will start tomorrow to ship on Thursday. And we ship twice every week. And we start a new set of orders every day so that we can bill them to that customer. And we have a great Wedge Fit team. We really encourage you to take the Wedge Fit analysis. You're going to kind of begin to make sense out of your own scoring range performance. And then call one of our team members and they'll walk you through. We got PGA professionals on the phone that can talk intelligently with you about wedge play, about, why you're having trouble. One of the biggest things I see in the wedge category with recreational golfers now is more and more people are going to light steel and graphite shafts in their irons. They're getting custom fitted. They're going into one of the big stores and buying wedges off the rack with the stiff flex, heavy steel shaft. They've got a 20 or 30 gram disconnect between their set match pitching wedge and their gap wedge. You can't make the same swing with those two golf clubs. So I'm a big believer, and nobody in the wedge category talks about shafts, and we talk about it all the time. We work with KBS. We have 3 weights of steel and 3 flexes. We have 3 weights of graphite and 3 flexes. We want to get that weight match and flex match to optimize your scoring range performance. And you're not going to do it with an off-the-shelf wedge with a stiff steel shaft in it. It's wrong for 95% of golfers.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that took me by surprise as I started diving into really understanding club building, club fitting overall, was really not only the importance of the shaft that like the driver and the long irons, but even the mid and low irons and then obviously the wedges as well. That was just kind of a light bulb moment to me. And you described it perfectly of like not only just the wedge flex, but the wedge weight. The shaft weight is such a big play and if you can truly be consistent with your wedges. And I think industry wide, like you hit the nail on the head, it's just not talked about enough.
No, it's not. And I use the kind of the anecdotal story. You're riding in a cart with your buddy and you go over to his ball and your ball is, 105, 110 yards. It's going to be a pitching wedge or a gap wedge. So you walk over there with your rangefinder, your pitching wedge and your gap wedge. Well, your pitching wedge is part of a set of irons that's been custom fitted to you, and it's got a 90-gram R-Flex shaft in it, graphite. And your gap wedge you purchased off the rack, some mainstream brand's got a 130-gram stiff flex steel shaft in it. So you're walking over there with 2 clubs that are 40 grams difference in weight. They're, 20 cycles per minute difference in shaft frequency. But you're thinking you can make the same swing with these 2 golf clubs, and it's physically impossible. You can't do it. It's the difference between a pickup and a Maserati. You've got 2 totally different things in your hand, but you haven't processed that. And you wonder why, you hit your wedges too high and too short. Well, because they're too heavy and too stiff is one of the reasons. And, I'm a big believer that even if you're going to play a Brand X wedge and not one of ours, go get the damn things reshafted to blend with your irons and create what I call a seamless transition. You want that seamlessness to go right through your set because you don't think differently about a gap wedge and a pitching wedge. It's a wedge. You're going to go make a swing. And, that gap wedge is 40 grams heavier. You're going to lose 5 to 8 miles an hour club head speed. The club head's going to get ahead of your hands because you can't load the shaft. And you're going to get a high ball flight that pops up short. And you're going to blame yourself. It wasn't your fault at all. It was the wedge.
So you're saying it really is the clubs?
Yeah. I mean, it is the golf club's fault. I mean, it's like I would tell you this, Dalton, you're a young flat belly. You probably hit it a mile. But if I took you out and gave you a persimmon driver from 1970s, I'm going to kick your butt off the tee. And I'm 70 years old.
I've got a bag in the back, and I think you're right because I struggle to hit these things.
Because you got to hit it in pinpoint perfect to get anything out of it. And your best drives are still going to be past mine, but your worst drives are going to be behind mine because of the golf club. So I don't think golf clubs can fix swing faults, but golf clubs can, all a golf club can do is give you a bigger, efficient area of impact. Let's use that term. It's not perfect, but it's efficient. So there's one pinpoint spot on every golf club that's optimizing that golf club. And, on modern drivers, it's a little high on the toe, and that's where the ball just really takes off on a high launch and low spin. But if you hit it down toward the center, a little in the heel or a little lower in the toe, you still get acceptable results out of that shot. Cavity back irons, the same thing. Hybrids is the same thing. The big spaceship putters, I mean, they're all about just hit it somewhere in the face, the ball's going to go. And yet we're saddled with these wedges that haven't changed 10% in 40 years. So I just think that's ridiculous, and I'm out to change it. I'm a one-man show.
Well, I love it. No, it's been fun having them in the bag and not only just trying them out, on the full swings, but just really playing around with them. And like you said, having that 4, 5, 6 round, and I've traveled with them as well. I haven't just played in my local courses where they're typically a little soggy. I've played, kind of up north a little bit where I've had some firm conditions, and it's been consistent along, any conditions I've played on, which is really, as you mentioned earlier, the true test of does this wedge perform the way you need it to perform. It's been so much fun having them in the bag, and I can't wait to continue to just perfect them in the feel that they give me, because it's so different from the Mizunos, the Titleists, the Pings that I've had since growing up. It's such a different feel once you get these in your hands.
Well, and I think the thing I would bet that you've experienced, because we hear it every day, is the spin and launch on those 30 to 70 yard wedge shots where you don't have a lot of club head speed. I mean, club head speed produces spin. A guy that hits a gap wedge 120 is going to spin it more than a guy that hits a gap wedge 90 because club head speed produces spin. But, whether you're a 2 handicap or a 22, if you're hitting a 50-yard shot, we got about the same club head speed because we want the ball to go 50 yards. And this is where the improved gear effect of these golf clubs really comes in to really imparting spin on those mid-range shots where you don't have club head speed on your side. And we hear more and more golfers saying, man, I'm spinning those mid-range wedge shots better than I ever have. And, talking about grooves and spin, a lot of wedge companies, they talk like grooves are the secret of spin. And what we found, and we did some robotic testing, and I've always found this to be fascinating, but we made Edison 54-degree wedges with no grooves at all. We mill the face perfectly smooth and hit balls off iron bar and then follow that up with our production model groove, which are as aggressive as everybody else's. And on a dry ball, mind you, now this is not with moisture and grass. This is a totally dry ball controlled robot. The grooves only added about 16% spin over a smooth, flat club face. And on a dry ball, our smooth, flat club face produced the same spin as the mainstream brands off-the-shelf wedge with full mill grooves. But that's the efficiency of this club head design. Now, you spray a little moisture or get a little grass on it, that smooth club face is not going to work. It's like driving in the rain with slick tires. I'm sorry, but the main purpose of grooves is to channel moisture and material away from, and get the ball and face to have some contact, because without that friction, you lose, the spin, because spin is caused by face friction and the grooves can only do so much. So, and again, the USGA hadn't changed the rules on grooves in 13 years. They announced that change in 2009 and gave all the manufacturers a year to kind of figure out what we're going to do. And we got to take the sharp corners off the grooves. And those rules haven't changed. What's changed is we've been able to get tighter and tighter to those tolerances because of milling techniques. But the grooves in 2022 are not more than 2 to 3% better than they were 12 years ago. It's minute. It is very small. It's about the club head. That's how it's like the driver. We're taking the weight low in the driver. We're putting carbon crowns on them, and we're launching the ball higher with more spin. And that's why the ball's going faster and further, because of the impact efficiency. Well, let's go look at wedges, and let's put that same impact efficiency study on the face of wedges, and we can improve performance.
Well, what you just described brought a really interesting question to my head, because I think we've seen the same thing in irons, right? Like, I don't think anyone's done something specifically incredibly game changing with irons when it comes to maybe a player's iron or like a cavity back. I don't think they're getting a whole lot different. I guess my question is, where do we go from here, right? You've done a phenomenal job of getting the club head and the sole to where it's at now. Is there just fractions of decimal points of improvements year to year? Is that what you're looking for? Or, where does the game go from 2022 if you're talking another 12 years out? Where do you see the improvements being made, and what does that look like from a wedge standpoint?
Well, I think that, and this kind of is tongue in cheek a little bit, but across the whole equipment categories, what you see in irons, for example, is bringing metalwood technology to irons. You're filling them with foam. You're making the faces real thin. Well, just my experience, I took a set of high-tech modern irons out today. I play a 2015 Ben Hogan blade that I invented and designed back then. And I've played 2 different models of irons in the last 25 years. I played a Reed Lockhart iron that I designed in 95 for 20 years. And then when I designed the new Hogan irons, I switched. But I took this high-tech modern set of irons out, and I wanted to see what they did. They've got foam filled and speed slots in the sole and pixie dust and whatever else is inside of there. And I made sure all my lofts were the same. And what I found is this high-tech, super tech set of irons launches the ball higher and goes the same distance of my forged blade. But it launches the ball higher. Is it more forgiving? Maybe a little bit, but it won't fix a fat shot, and it won't fix a skull, and it won't fix a shank, and it won't fix when you come over the top. And, and I play down here, and I always laugh when the tour plays in 12 to 15 mile an hour winds, and they whine like babies. And I play on the Texas coast. If it's under 20, we feel like we drew a good day, and so we learned to flight the golf ball. And I think what I found with that modern set of irons, I could not flight the golf ball the way I wanted. I could not pull a few yards off of that 7-iron because I'm hitting it in the wind. I want to pull some spin off of it. I found it to be very unresponsive to shot making. And I'm an old school guy. I grew up with persimmon woods and blade irons. And to me, the thrill of golf is shot making. And some people, they just want to make contact. And if you make center face contact 3 times around, it really doesn't matter what kind of club you play. Go get some lessons. And I think the real future of golf for most players is put a freeze on your equipment buying after you buy your Edison wedges, of course, but then put a freeze on your equipment buying and invest your money in lessons. I would tell you 95% of amateurs that I observe that are over about a 5 handicap got a very bad grip on the golf club. You can't get there from here with a bad grip. You were probably taught that very early in life, both of you guys. And, you've got swing mechanics. You've got to have good fundamentals to get the most out of any golf club, regardless of whether it's an Edison wedge or a high-tech set of irons or high-tech driver. That equipment can't make up for bad swing fundamentals. And I've always been a big believer. I was blessed to be raised by a scratch player father and a PGA professional that cared about us kids. And, at 70, I could still play to a 1 handicap. I could still play to regular tees and hit it out there and hit shots that I want to hit most of the time. And I feel very blessed in that. But to me, the fun of golf is seeing a shot and executing it. And, when you get to that advanced level to low double or single digit, you get to really play the game. And it's a fascinating game. It's given me, a great life, most of the friends in my life, great relationship with my father, my brother, most of my friends. They either come from fishing, bird hunting, or golf. So, that's where I make my friends. But, I think people don't practice in an efficient, effective way. And they don't take enough instruction. And I talk to our teaching pro staff at our club all the time. It's like, just walk up to people and tell them, I can take 5 shots off your score for $500. I mean, tell them. That driver not going to do that. You guys in the teaching business, you need to guarantee your work. If you can't guarantee it, don't do it. So that's kind of another soapbox, but
Hey, amen to that. I just got started teaching in January, and you're spot on. Every student that I've seen so far, a grip change has went a mile, and then a fundamental of just understanding where your feet are goes another mile and a half. So I think it's just it is funny to see the big man. OEMs always preach, oh, buy our clubs, it'll fix everything. Right. And that's their marketing, and they're marketing geniuses. They have been for the better part of a couple decades. So you can't fault them there. But I think you're spot on. Become best friends with your local PGA pro is probably the best thing to become a really, really solid golfer.
Well, and I even, and I've been a student of the game my whole life, but, I got in a little slump a couple of weeks ago, and I, grabbed our teaching pro and I said, you don't know my game at all. You've never played with me, never seen me. Come watch me hit balls and tell me if you can figure out where I should be versus where I've gotten. Because I was a Ben Hogan disciple. I'm a flat swing playing guy. Very simple. I mean, best compliment I ever had in my life is I played golf at Wingfoot, got 35 years ago. And my caddy said, you studied Ben Hogan's book, didn't you? And I said, man, that's like the best compliment I ever had in my life. You can look at my swing and tell where I got it, But,
Love it.
But to me, learning about striking a golf ball is fascinating. I mean, and people that don't love the range, I think they miss a big part of this game. I mean, just learning what makes a golf ball do this or that off of a golf club is fascinating. I'm a range rat. I'll go hit, 150 range balls, just all different kind of ways, just to see what happens, just trying different things, just for fun of striking a golf ball.
Yeah, I think Dante and I have had that conversation a couple of times. We've kind of had to talk each other to get back on the course, because both of us just love spending too much time on the range. That we could spend hours there.
I was always on the course.
And I think that players that don't go to the range will never improve their shot making skills, and players that spend too much time on the range will not perfect their playing skills, because there's a whole lot to be said with a bucket of balls on the range and hitting 7-irons versus, going to the course. And it's like, okay, I'm 162, wind's coming out of the right. What do I need to do with this shot? And it's very rarely a textbook 7-iron or textbook 5-iron or textbook gap wedge. There's always some other things going on, where the pin is, what you just did on the last hole, how you hit your drive to get to this spot, or you pumped up a little bit, or you down a little bit, what'd you do with your last iron shot? And I had a couple of kids I worked with that were big baseball players, some years ago, and they were both pitchers. And I said, guys, golf is much more like pitching than it is hitting, because when you're on the pitcher's mound, everything is in your head. You don't have to throw the ball till you're ready, and you just let 2 in a row get high and inside. You're going to hang on to it a little bit, trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's golf. And when you're in the batter's box, it's instinctive. I mean, you don't have time to think. It's all instinctive. And golf is more like pitching than it is hitting, because it's very deliberate. And hey, that pitcher doesn't have to let go of the ball until he's ready, and that golfer doesn't have to pull the club back until he's ready. So you get your mind filled with all that, pixie gremlins and everything,
Usually more gremlins than I don't know what the opposite of I guess more gremlins than pixie, but that's the amateur golfer, I think, in us all.
Well, exactly. And and I went through my own period. I went through a period earlier this year where I'd had no negative thoughts on the golf course. I was shooting the best scores of my life. Actually, it was really weird. And then somewhere in there, I hit a few bad shots, and the pixies went and traded themselves for gremlins, and so but the surefire killer of any shot is to have doubt when you're over it. At some point you got to, I love the movie 7 Days in Utopia, the David Cook movie, and David's a brilliant guy, and I've had the privilege of spending time with him. But it's, it nails it. It's see it, feel it, and trust it. And if you don't get to trust it, you better not take the club back. You're not ready yet, right?
Yeah, no, it's that movie is incredible. My dad and I will sit down and watch that over and over again. So I love that reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, where can the average golfer go and get themselves the wedge fitting analysis, and where can they go get some Edison wedges?
Well, our website is edisonwedges.com. We're very proud of the fact that we deliver more information about wedges in general. What makes a wedge work? Why does it work? Why does a wedge not work sometime? And, we encourage you to spend some time there, and then you'll see the link to our wedge fit profile analysis. We call it the wedge fit scoring range analysis. And it lets us have a conversation with you so that when we get on the phone with you, if you want to call us, we kind of have an idea who we're talking to and what your gremlins are and what your irons look like and, what lofts you're carrying, what your strength profile is like. And it lets us, be helpful in getting that, that set of wedges in your hands that are most likely to be right for you. And, we've had a number of customers that, we make a recommendation as to what lofts and shaft, and then they call us back and say, something's not right. And we go, well, hey, send them back. Let's do this. I don't want you to have Edison wedges in your bag if you don't like them. And we'll either work them over to get them right, or we'll take them back and give you a refund if we can't get them right, because we're not miracle workers. I mean, there's still a skill involved, but we do know that we're building the most distance consistent, most forgiving, highest spinning wedges on the market today. And if we can't get you there, it's not going to be because we don't try. We're going to work our tails off to get you what you want out of your wedge game. So it's edisonwedges.com.
I love it. I know. I mean, you talked on it earlier as well. 10 different lofts, 5 different shaft combinations, 2 different grip options, custom length, custom lie angles. You guys seriously cater to, I think, every and any golfer that wants to come to the website and check you guys out. I know just from my experience, the wedge fit process was fun. I enjoyed answering all the questions and just really, sitting down and thinking about, as a golfer, like, what is my launch angle, and kind of thinking through the process of how high do I hit my wedges and where is my miss, and how can I get better at the, the level of a couple different wedges. And I just, want to say as well, I think the lofts that I have on my wedges, I have a 59, a 54, and a 51, are lofts I've never had before. I think it goes again to, if you're buying off the shelf, you go to your, I had a 60, I'll replace it with a 60. And I had a 56, I'll replace it with a 56. That's what I had in the bag before. And you're mindless when you go to the retail buyers and you buy off the shelf because it's what you had before. And you don't stop to think, well, do I usually let that 60 a little short, or what does the leading edge do? Do I dig that 60 in? Probably. But I'm just going to go buy it because that's what I've always had. So I love the fact that this wedge fit scoring analysis allowed myself, even as kind of a low handicap player, to just stop and think, where can I improve, and what maybe are my gaps that I should be moving towards, instead of, consistently just keeping in the bag and thinking I got to get better on the range.
Yeah. Well, and again, there's trial and error. And one thing we are big believers in is, let's put some wedges in your hands, go play 3 or 4 rounds with them. And then you'll begin to get a feel for whether we got the right thing in your hands or not. You'll begin to get a feel for what these things can really do. And I always tell people, you have to hit enough shots to find yourself going, wow, I got away with that one. And that's what we're about. If you hit it perfect every time, it doesn't matter what you play. But nobody does. Even the tour players don't. So what we're trying to do is give you better average results without compromising your best shots. We want your best shots to be as good as they've ever been. And I've had a number of people share the same thing that you've been sharing, Dalton, is that, I'm hitting more wedge shots real close than ever before. But the best thing is my mediocre shots are closer than they've ever been. And that's what makes golf, very playable and enjoyable.
Sure. All of a sudden, your shots that you think you're missing the green are giving yourself a 15, 20 footer. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, it is a big difference. And that drives me every day. And hearing these kind of stories from recreational golfers that don't make a living play in the game. And, one of these days, I think tour players will figure it out. I mean, we've got some college players that are starting to fiddle around with our stuff a little bit because they've heard about them. And they don't have those thousands of hours in short game yet. And, it's just as easy to learn the short game with our wedges as anybody else's. But if you're already 10 years, 12 years down the road with that short game learning curve, it's a challenge. I mean, these tour guys, and I've worked with them. I've had the real wonderful privilege of working with Ben Crenshaw and Tom Kite and Paul Azinger and Robert Wren, some great guys. These guys are magical what they can do with wedges in their hands. I mean, they're sick how skillful they are, but they didn't get there by accident. They got there by hitting thousands and thousands and thousands of shots. And, Ben Crenshaw told me he used to spend, he noted as a fabulous putter. He said he used to spend 4 or 5 hours on the putting green. He just loved putting. I mean, he loved it. It was a thrill for him. For most of us, like, I'm going to hit 10 putts and go to the first tee, And, Tom Watson made the comment in his book, Getting Up and Down, that when he was a little kid, his dad put him out there and said, now get the ball in the hole. So he'd put the ball like this far from the hole because that was the whole point of it. And to this day, he said he didn't like people hitting putts back at him. I want to finish every hole, whether I have to knock in a 4-incher or a 2-footer. I want to finish every hole because the ball going in the hole is what the game is about. And sometimes we lose sight of that. I do. I mean, I think a lot of us do.
For sure. Now, the more kind of hit and giggles you play in, or just the afternoon nines, and someone's giving you 3 or 4 footers, you definitely can lose that. But I think learning the idea of having a little bit more play with these irons and wedges, with these wedges specifically, is something that I know I find joy in. So, guys, we've had an absolute blast, Terry, having you on the show. It's been fun to hear the story and the technology behind it, because as much as you can read on your website, it's fun to hear you tell the story and really put the idea in motion in our heads of what exactly this wedge is doing on the course. So real true pleasure to have you on. I think we could talk golf for hours, so we'll have to have you on again at some point. It's been a lot of fun having you on.
Well, it's been great being here, and thanks for, the fun conversation. And, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about what I do, and I'm very passionate about the game of golf. And I think it's just the best game ever. And I've been very blessed that the golf has given me so much in my life, and to be able to give back to golf by designing golf clubs that are user-friendly. And that's really what I'm all about. Is I want to create user-friendly golf clubs, for people to help them get the ball in the hole better. And I'm going to keep pushing on that. I don't have any interest in retirement. I'd be bored if I did. So, you're going to keep seeing new things from us, and we're going to keep pushing the envelope.
I love it. Always
Awesome.
Excited to see manufacturers, especially, smaller manufacturers, keep pushing the envelope and challenging the bigger OEMs. I think that's the fun in the game. It's the fun, and I'm sure what you do is to continue to push the envelope of what's being done within the golf industry overall. So, guys, as we come out with this podcast on iTunes and Spotify this week, we'll also be rolling out some fun reviews on YouTube, as well as our Instagram and Twitter. So go check that out at Enjoy the Walk Pod on Instagram and Twitter, Enjoy the Walk Golf Podcast on YouTube. And to find all of our links, you can go to www.enjoythewalkpod.com. So check out for all of that this week, guys, and exciting to hopefully roll out some more on the course stuff with Edison Golf in the future. So Terry, again, absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thank you a lot. And I'd love to come back and we can dive into any aspect of golf you want to. I mean, I love the game. I love the history, the architecture. It's the best thing ever. So I hope your listeners enjoyed it. I hope we see some people coming to Edison and seeing what we're doing with wedges. And again, if somebody puts an Edison wedge in their bag and it isn't doing what we want it to do, we're either going to fix it or we're going to buy it back from you, because, we think every golf club purchase should be super satisfactory. And that's what drives us every day. So thanks a lot for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Love it. Absolutely,
Love
man.
it.
You got believers in us. So as always, guys, you can get out there, carry your clubs, and enjoy the walk.
That's the stuff. One shot at